With that, take your questions. Bill.
Yeah, to the issue of the Russia probe, I'm wondering, Sean, if you can tell us when the president knew, whether the president knew at the time that Jared Kushner was seeking to establish back-channel communications at the Russian embassy to the Russian government. And if he didn't know at the time, when did he find out?
I think that assumes a lot, and I would just say that Mr. Kushner's attorney has said that Mr. Kushner has volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings, and he will do the same if he's contacted or connected with any other inquiry.
Did the president discuss it, though?
I'm not going to get into what the president did or did not discuss, but what your question assumes is a lot of facts that are not substantiated by anything but anonymous sources that are so far being leaked out.
Does he approve of that action?
You're asking if he approves of an action that is not a confirmed action. That being said, I think Secretary Kelly and General McMaster have both discussed that in general terms, back channels are an appropriate part of diplomacy.
So does the White House dispute that happened?
I'm not going to get into it, but your question presupposes facts that have not been confirmed. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. Did the president retweeted this morning an article about that back channel that was based on an anonymous source that said that there was an effort to set up a back channel, that it was the Russians who suggested that, and that it was to talk about Syria? Was the president not confirming that there was an effort and the facts that I just said?
I think what I just said speaks for itself.
But you said that first of all that the article was based on anonymous sources.
Which it is.
But the Fox article that the president retweeted was also based on anonymous sources. Why are those sources, or the source rather, that they used more credible than the ones in the Washington Post article?
Again, I don't think there's two issues at hand. One is the statement that Jared's attorney has provided. Second is whether or not the dossier that is largely the basis of this was largely discredited in the first place. Most of the publications here refused to even publish it in the first place. So again, I'm not going to get into confirming stuff. There's an ongoing investigation. Yeah. No.
Where do you see the state of the U.S.-German relationship right now, and how important is that relationship to the White House and the president and the American public?
I think the relationship that the president has had with Merkel, he would describe as fairly unbelievable. They get along very well. He has a lot of respect for her. They continue to grow the bond that they had during their talks in the G7. And he views not just Germany, but the rest of Europe as an important American ally. During his conversations at NATO and at the G7, the president reaffirmed the need to deepen and improve our transatlantic relationship.
And how did he view her comments that she felt that Europe could no longer depend on the United States?
Well, respectfully, that's not what she said. So since you're misquoting the chancellor, let me read what she actually said. She said, "The time when Europe could rely solely on others is somewhat in the past. And as I have witnessed over the past few days, Europe must take its fate into its own hands. This means working in friendship with the U.S., the U.K., and neighborly relations with Russia and other partners." That's great. That's what the president called for. He called for additional burden sharing. The Secretary General of NATO said that the president's calls are what's moving them in the right direction. The president is getting results, and more countries are stepping up their burden sharing. That is a good thing for them, it's a good thing for NATO, and it's a good thing for America. Scott Thuman.
Yeah, Sean, has the president been meeting with lawyers specifically about defending himself in the special counsel investigation into Russia? I'm sure you've probably seen the reports that Congressman Adam Schiff likes Jared Kushner before his committee and possibly even go over his clearances.
I'm not going to dignify partisan accusations of anonymous sources and alleged unsubstantiated attacks. So I'm not even going to just.
About the president, whether or not he's had any meetings
If
with
we
lawyers
have,
specifically.
if the president has a lot of meetings. If the president has a decision on anything, we'll be sure to let you know. Yeah, Brian.
First, welcome back, by the way. Thanks. Two quick questions. This weekend, while you all were gone, someone shot up the Lexington Herald-Leader, and of course we understand what happened in Montana with now Congressman Gianforte. I think he has a misdemeanor charge of assault. Will this administration take a stand against violence aimed at reporters?
We'll take a stance against violence against any individual.
Well, and so would you, all right, second, well, let me follow that up with, would you support legislation? You all have been the ones that have come out screaming against fake media. Would you support legislation that would support real reporting, such as this SHIELD law I've asked you before, such as other?
We have a constitution, Brian, that supports the First Amendment, which allows all Americans and anyone in this country, frankly, the freedom of expression. We support that full.
The second question: when you say that you're gonna try to defeat ISIS and Al Qaeda, what are you doing to eliminate the abject poverty that is the breeding ground for the terrorists?
As we've mentioned before, his national security team is putting together a holistic solution to defeating ISIS. When that strategy is complete, we'll have something for you on it.
So you said that a back channel is an appropriate part of diplomacy.
I didn't say that. I said that Secretary Kelly and General McMaster have both commented on that.
Add more to that. Well, how is it that it's appropriate for someone who's a private citizen, not sworn in as an official of the U.S. government, to conduct any kind of negotiation or diplomacy with a foreign official?
Again, I would just refer you to both the comments that Secretary Kelly, General McMaster have said about how they can be an important tool in diplomacy.
But at the time, there was no one who was close to the president who was working in an official government capacity. How is that appropriate?
Again, I think that both of those individuals who are steeped in national and security and foreign policy have said that that can be an effective tool, generally speaking, in diplomacy.
Does the departure of Michael Duffy signal some kind of broader reorganization in the West Wing? Obviously, we're hearing that former campaign aides like Gordon Dusty and David Bossie might be returning. There's a war room might be setting up to deal with production reservations.
I don't think so. I think the president is very pleased with his team, and he has a robust agenda, as I've just outlined, that he looks forward to working with Congress to get done to achieve results for the American people.
Is the White House considering changing how you communicate the president's message at all? I mean, be it him communicating directly more or different faces at the podium?
Well, I don't think that there's anything that we haven't said before about how, the president has a unbelievably qualified cabinet, and we've utilized them a ton in the past. If we can continue to do that on key issues, we're going to do that. Ultimately, the best messenger is the president himself. He's always proven that he is the best messenger, not just for what he wants to articulate, but that the American people resoundingly chose him as their president because he understands the frustrations and concerns and values of the American people, and he is probably the best person to communicate that.
Do you think that he is happy with the messaging that's been done thus far?
I think he's very pleased with the work of his staff. I think that he is frustrated, like I am and like so many others, to see stories come out that are patently false, to see narratives that are wrong, to see quote-unquote fake news. When you see stories get perpetrated that are absolutely false, that are not based in fact, that is troubling. And he's rightly concerned.
Can you give an example of fake news, Sean? Can you give
absolutely,
us an example?
Jim, I'll give you an example.
Please.
Sure. Friday, the president was having a great discussion at the G7, and someone from the BBC and ultimately an incoming reporter from the New York Times retweeted that the president was being rude by disrespecting the Italian prime minister. And when in fact you all in every one of the meetings that we sit in watch the president with that one earpiece that's been used by other presidents. And yet the president did a great job at NATO, building stronger bonds at the G7, increasing America's presence around the world. And that's the kind of thing that the BBC and ultimately the reporter who's now joining the New York Times push out and perpetuate with no apology. What, you're shaking your head, Peter? I mean, it's true. You did it. No, I'm answering Jim's, but I think.
Can't reporters make mistakes?
No, but that's not. But that's just fake. That is a fake.
That was
is
in
a-
the newspaper. None of it was on the front page. Your trip was all over the front page. You're making something out of one tweet instead of the
But again, you
vast
guys
majority of
defend
the
your
public.
mistakes like that. With all due respect, I was asked to give an example, and I did it.
Prominence than anybody ever.
I
did
just
originally.
gave an answer to Jim. The problem is that I think the president, to the question, gets frustrated when he sees fake stories get published, things that aren't based in fact, and a narrative gets pushed.
That's just so.
So that's just, well, with all due respect, I think when you see instances like that get perpetrated over and over again, that is frustrating. I'm not here. I didn't come here with a list of things, but I think that there's well, thank you. I appreciate it. What you get to decide what's big and what's not. I think there's a lot of the stuff that has gotten pushed out based on unnamed, unaccountable sources that is very troubling. And I think when you see the same kind of thing happen over and over again, it is concerning. And I think the president has fought very hard to bring back jobs. You, as I mentioned, you had over $500 billion of investment that's coming in that's going to grow jobs, grow our economy. That should be a big story. The president's results when it came to fighting terrorism, was a big thing. The idea that we're standing up a global center to fight extremism in Saudi Arabia that's uniting Muslim countries, that's a big deal. I think
reports that there's going to be an overhaul of the communications
Wait, how
operation
did-
are fake news.
I think
That's the question.
I know. So now you want to come back to that. What I'm telling you is that the reason that the president is frustrated is because there's a perpetuation of false narratives, a use of unnamed sources over and over again about things that are happening that don't ultimately happen, and I think that is troubling. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.